to another episode of The Conversation. This show is here to stimulate wide and diverse discussions on the many topics that are of national importance. To this end, we are offering this platform to have the conversation. I am your host, Carla Barnett. April 2nd is celebrated as World Autism Awareness Day. And here in Belize, April is being celebrated as Autism Awareness Month. Not too many people are familiar with the terminology, but if we go by the statistics in the US, where 1 out of every 54 children in the US is diagnosed with Autism Spectrum Disorder, we can assume that there are about 7,000 Belizeans who suffer from this disorder. Autism, or Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD, refers to a broad range of conditions characterized by challenges with social skills, repetitive behaviors, speech, and nonverbal communication. Tonight, we are very pleased to have with us a parent who will give us a first-hand look at Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD. Christy Castillo Almeida is the mother of a 13-year-old teen with autism. Welcome to the show, Christy.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure to have you here. It's a very important topic that we're discussing, and I know you're going to be opening up and explaining to us what it all means. I just read a textbook-type description of autism, but can you tell us in your own words what Autism Spectrum Disorder is?
Oh, probably the most complicated thing. You ever remember the Sesame Street a thing where he said, I just saw the biggest word, it's alpha documentum moxamuisis. That's sort of like autism, because if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child. It's a spectrum disorder, meaning every child is affected, might have problems in one of those three, or two or the three areas, but to different levels. So everyone looks differently, everyone reacts differently. They have different reactions to the therapies, to different stimuli with their senses. So I have been living with autism with my son now 13 years. Throughout those 13 years, I've read countless books, attended countless workshops, trainings, assistance, and every time I still manage to learn something new about my son. That's how complicated autism is.
Your son is Mateo.
Yes.
Where does he fall on the spectrum?
Mateo, well, when he was diagnosed, they called it severe autism. Now it would be level 3. So Mateo is a level 3 autism. He is nonverbal, and because autism comes with comorbidities, meaning that if you have a child that's diagnosed with autism, as they grow up in life, because a child with autism becomes an adult with autism, they are more likely to have a lot of other diagnoses. So Mateo also has apraxia. He suffers from anxiety and depression. We've had bouts of aggression. We have sleep issues, feeding issues, so and sensory processing issues.
So it's all very complex.
So it comes very complex, and it's sort of like, okay, we have this under control. This is going well. We've managed this. Then he grows a little bit more, and there's another issue to deal with.
How old was he when he was diagnosed?
We got a diagnosis early. So we had an official diagnosis by the time he was 18 months. I started it about just after 15. But because Mateo had what was called regressive autism, he developed normally, hit all his milestones. I was a new mom, and I'm a reader. So I followed the what to expect when you're expecting for the first year and everything else. So I literally checked off the things. I have videos of him, following instructions. He said, Mama, Dada, Kak for our dog, because our dog was named Cognac, not Cat. But he'd stock blocks. He did these things. And then it started for me, at least noticing when he got an ear infection. And then shortly after that, we were going to travel, and he was a fussy kid. And I kept making excuses. I kept saying, well, it's a new environment. Well, this is da-da-da. And people would say, well, he doesn't go to other people. I'm like, oh, no. He's like super friendly. And he was. But all of a sudden, he only wanted me. He wouldn't sleep. He wouldn't. He was giving problems with eating. And so I kept thinking, oh my gosh, maybe he's sick again. Maybe something happened. And so finally, I took him to get a hearing test, because I thought maybe he'd gone deaf. And that started the process for it. And so by the time he was 18 months, we had an official diagnosis, and we
Okay.
started therapy right around the same time. So he wasn't even 2 years old when he was
Very
started
young.
getting
He's
it.
a baby. He was
was
a
a
baby, and,
baby.
and he seemed to be developing normally up to 15 months, and then he started to regress.
Yeah, and there's a portion of kids that have that regressive. Some
Okay.
parents will tell you that because it happens from birth, they can see where their children didn't meet the milestones. But for Mateo, that's what he had. He had what was called regressive autism.
Okay, and what has the journey been like, learning to care for him and trying to create that space within which he can grow as he could?
It's definitely been challenging. I'm not going to lie to you. First, it was just trying to figure out what it was. I had no
Right.
clue. Most people don't know what autism is until you're living it. And so, because I'm a voracious reader, I spent like the first year just trying to learn as much as possible, and I kind of burnt out. That wasn't the smartest thing. I'll
Right.
tell parents, if you get the diagnosis, you want to learn, you want to do it, but you got to take it in stride, because
Right.
you can't. It's more like running an ultra marathon than a 5K. You
Right.
have to pace yourself. And so trying to learn how to help my son was a challenge. And then just the acceptance is never easy. You don't want to hear
Okay.
that there's anything different with your child. You as a parent
Right.
have all of these dreams and hopes. And then all of a sudden they tell you this thing and you're going, wait, what? So you're telling me what? And every hope, every dream, all of a sudden, for me at least at that time, was shattered. And it took a while for me, as part of the acceptance, to realize that, okay, our journey is going to be different, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad thing. And that takes a while for a parent to get to.
What are some of the everyday challenges that we take for granted that
Well, Mateo is
that you
nonverbal.
face? Okay.
So when we first started with therapy, we tried sign language, and then we tried PICS, picture exchange. Sign language, he started, he had weight, he had more, mama. And then as soon as he learned more, there was nothing else. Everything he wanted, he would do more. And we're like, more what, Teo? And so sign did not work. And then we tried picture exchange, but he's so hyperactive that the pictures just kept getting destroyed. It wasn't really good at all, like for us. And so much frustration with that. He couldn't tell me if he was hungry. Like, he was potty trained, but only if he knows where the bathroom is. Because if we're in a strange area, he can't tell you that he wants to go. Imagine, right? Or he can't tell you he's hungry or he hurt. For the first time ever, and it happened in 2021, my son expressed emotion using his iPad. He said, I feel angry, using his iPad. And that was the first time in the 13 years that he ever expressed emotion using that. You know, I could tell if he's happy or he's sad, but he couldn't tell me these things.
Right.
And he still can't. He can't tell me if his stomach hurts.
Right.
You know, and so
So you kind of had to figure it out as he was growing up.
I realized that, you know, he wasn't a biter, but once in a blue moon, he'd bite me. And I realized he bites, usually by the night, he'd start vomiting or have a fever or something. And he was like not feeling very good, and then he'd latch on. Because I wouldn't have that. I'd go a year or two without bites, because he rarely got sick. But then I'd get this bite, and I realized, wait a minute, something's
not
happening.
feeling
And
well.
sure enough, you know, an hour or two later, I'm
Okay.
taking his temperature, and he's roasting with fever. So it was really monitoring all the behaviors.
Was he ever tending to injure himself?
Yes, he has sensory processing issues, so he doesn't feel pain like you and I do. So he would cut himself, and to this day, I only know he hurts himself because I see blood.
Okay.
One of the times he put his hand on the barbecue grill, and all I could see were the burn marks, the blister marks on the grill.
Okay.
And I found him in the corner just picking at it. Because he didn't cry. He didn't come and say boo-boo or hurt or anything like that.
He doesn't
was
feel
just,
the pain.
He didn't feel the pain at all. And so we
Okay.
had to watch him with fire, with anything, because
Anything that he could get hurt with.
and because he doesn't feel his body like you and I do, he seeks out these things. So I sent him a video today of him walking along the bars, and just the other day he did the same thing. I live on the second floor, and there's the railings, and he climbed up and he's walking along the second floor railing, and he's just like, there's no sense of danger for him. I have found him on an AC unit outside of a window on a fourth floor building, just hanging his legs and looking down. He's what we call a sensory seeker.
Right.
So he wants to climb and tumble and just look for these things. And so we always had to watch. Like, he loves the water and he's a swimmer.
You're his primary caregiver.
I have been until I came home.
So
Because it was always just me and him. I quit my job because he was such high needs. And I felt that if anybody could help him, it would be me. So for years, it was just him and I. And then I came home and COVID hit, and I had the meltdown this time because I was like, how am I going to do this on my own, locked in a house when he never wants to be at home?
Right.
And he's not a child I can leave alone for any
can't.
time. So it's like, wait, how am I going to shower? What's going to happen?
So pretty much there's no social life
There
here.
was-
There's no work life.
There wasn't at all. But since I've been home, I hired a shadow, a paraprofessional, Jen, who knew nothing about autism, but we taught, and she's learned with Mateo. And that is how I am able to be here tonight and do what I do with Autism Belize, is because I have help and he has a buddy.
We understand that routine is very critical for people with ASD, like the daily routine of going to school, work. What impact did school closure have during the past? What is the impact of that on Mateo?
Besides me gaining 20 pounds. Oh, Teo.
On Mateo.
Okay, yeah, no, I know where we're going. I had a hard time because even coming home, I was really frightened about coming home. I knew I'd have my family for support, but I was going to lose my network that I had. And being network, I mean his doctors, his therapists, whatever. Because we would go to school, then he'd do, occupational therapy and behavior therapy. We had playtime therapy. We've all done all of these things. And coming home, I knew there was none of that in Belize.
Right.
And so on top of just trying to get used to just having school and finding things for him to do, because for him, school is only 8 to 12.
Right.
That's as much sensory input as he can handle.
Right.
So on top of that, now you're taking away school. I had no idea how it would be. And initially it was hard, and we've had our cycles. We went through weeks where he wouldn't sleep at night. He would just be up all night long. Like he'd go to sleep, say 9 o'clock. He would wake up 11, 12 and be up until maybe 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon again. And when he's up, he's not like up reading a book. I mean, he's up running around. All the lights are on in the house. If you're not watching, the fridge door is open, the water's pouring. It's a party at our house. So keeping him engaged, keeping him active, finding routines was really difficult. And that's where I'm really grateful for where Jen came in, because she moved in with me for COVID. She wasn't living at home before. And it was between the two of us that we were able to manage and not burn out or go crazy or
and create that kind of atmosphere where he could.
For it. We tried him with movies because he's never been one to sit down and watch movies. Except for Mamma Mia. We discovered that over COVID. Go figure, not Mickey, not Nemo, not
Mamma
anything.
Mia.
One night we were just like, I'm gonna show Jen because she had no idea what Mamma Mia was, which was sacrilege for me. So we put it on and my kid sat there and was like staring, and it's literally the longest he's ever watched anything on TV.
Maybe it's the music.
And it was the music. It absolutely was the music. So every night after that, we kept trying different musicals and shows to see what would get its attention. Nothing quite like Mamma Mia.
Well, maybe you need to get that particular kind of music.
Make my mother very happy.
Christy, recently we learned of the passing of the young man who had Down syndrome. He was a fixture on Albert Street, downtown area. Down syndrome is not in the autism spectrum, right?
No, it's a special need. And we have parents with Down syndrome in our group. But similarly, when I found out about Andrew, I didn't know who he was. I'd lived here for 18 years, but my parents all came to tell me all about him. And it absolutely broke my heart because I listened. I went to the funeral and I listened to the family of Mirab speak and Debari, and they talked about how he came to work, he knew who the boss was, he helped with the carts, he did this and he did that. And I cried. I cried because of loss of potential. It bothered me watching this young man or listening to about his story, thinking that if he had gotten the support as a child, if he had gotten the proper schooling so he could learn the way he, because
Right.
Downs doesn't mean that you can't learn.
Absolutely.
You know, and they said, oh, well, he wasn't speaking clearly. There are other means of communication.
And
you know,
therapy can help.
Exactly. He could have, and if he could have gotten up and be proud of a uniform and find a way to the bus to go visit his family in Marab, this young man could have had some sort of job. Maybe he would have needed to live in assisted living. Maybe it could have only been a part-time job, but he could have had more. And this is why I want to scream so many days. Because just like with this young man, I have another parent in my group who has a son with Downs. He is at BES. He is learning. She's working with him. We went to special needs yoga this month, and the day after, he was creating his own poses on trying this thing. They've worked with him to learn to ride a bike. They take him to therapy. I watch her, young boy, thinking he has the same potential that Andrew had. Except because he had a family who was working and help and the support and the finances, he is going to be something in life. And Andrew was an icon, and we loved him, and he was loved, and they took care of him and all of that. But he could have been more. And this is the stress I need to put for everyone out there. Whether autism touches your life or not, our kids have potential. Maybe my son, because of where he is on the spectrum, his potential might not be where another child on the spectrum might be. Somebody can become a lawyer or prime minister or whatever. But we have to invest in our kids now. We have to teach them the way they need to learn. We need to work with them. We need to build capacity in this country and recognize that these children have value and should not be locked up in a house or just left to wander the streets, so that when it comes time, we go, oh my gosh, he was so sweet.
I know. And Andrew, I knew when he was a little thing, I knew of him because he grew up in the Ladyville area. And so I saw him a few times and I knew a little bit about him, but I didn't know what had happened to him until I actually saw a picture of him on Facebook showing him dancing.
Right? And
you know?
It was touching. I loved it. I loved how, and was grateful for how the Albert Street community came out and helped. And the funeral home did a wonderful job, and they donated the casket. And that was all wonderful. But maybe if we had come out for him when he was a child, you know, what would his life then have been? And I mean, one of my biggest fears as a mom with a child with special needs is I can't live forever. I'm determined to try to live to be at least 150, but I can't live forever. And what happens to Teo when I'm gone?
And that is a fear of a lot of all parents.
That is our biggest fear. And so I always feel if a society can invest in our children, our youth, then they can be productive, contributing members of society as an adult. Rather than later on we build more welcome resource centers to try feed the people who are wandering the streets and everything else. Because I look at these guys now and I wonder, back then, if we knew what we knew, would they have been diagnosed with autism? If we knew how to teach properly, would they still be who they are? You know, and it absolutely breaks my heart.
You told us, you mentioned the Autism Awareness group that you've started. Tell us a little about that. What does it do? What is its name? How do you reach it? Tell us everything.
Autism Belize. After coming home and speaking to a couple of parents, because my kid was going to Horizon, well, is going to Horizon. And so I met other parents and I started talking. And that was when it was abundantly clear that we lacked support, mainly for parents. We have lacked the services too, but for the parents. And I focus mainly, I say this for the parents because if we don't have enough speech therapists and our behavioral therapists, we have no occupational therapists in this country, then we can't just sit at home and go, oh no, what are we going to do? it's on the parent then to help the children. So my goal was really, I'm just going to try and educate the parents. And I also recognize that a lot of these parents, the ones who are able to get the diagnosis, because that's an expense too, they got a diagnosis and it was, and then what? And there were many of them. There were some who were tech savvy and could go on the computer and learn and whatever. But a lot of them still had no idea. And so I started out, because, you know, my timing is impeccable, launched Autism Belize April 2020, just for COVID. And so we quickly switched around and went online. And so we've done like guest speaker live events. Now we do monthly parent and teacher trainings. We launched online. Okay. So anyone can go sign up and you register for the training. We usually ask some questions so we can gear where our audience is at, what they know. So we tailor the training for the answers of the questions. The trainings happen once a month. They last about 2 hours, more or less. We did one for parents and depression, and that went to like 3.5 hours, mainly because of the interest. But most of them are there. And then we started discovering more and more teachers were coming to our trainings. So we've recently launched what we call a SEND teacher training module, Special Education Needs Training Module. We had our first one this month on IEPs, Individual Education Programs, plans, and we had 300 teachers and had to turn away probably another 100.
So
but we were maxed out at that.
Again.
We'll have to do it again. And those were intensive. It was 4 hours. But the interaction was great. Like the presenter was like, should we take a break? And they were like, no. So it was well received from the teachers. So we focused a lot on trainings. We also do a monthly parent support group meeting. We meet the last Saturday of every month. And because of COVID, we've been doing it online. So we get people from around the country, parents from around the country to come in. I am a firm believer that no matter how many degrees and experience you might have, some of the best advice I've ever gotten to help Mateo is from other parents who've lived through it. So
shared experience.
Exactly. We share experience. And actually in this year, we've had parents that have potty trained their kid because of help from the others. We've had parents that have had more success with feeding because of some of our discussions. So it helps sleeping or just complaining about the lack of sleep or how whatever. So we meet every the last Saturday of every month. So those are some of our main things. Our Facebook Live is for parents too, but it's generally for public. Like we try and build more awareness there. So we've done about 15.
So people who might not know what they're dealing with would get that first information and can learn.
Exactly. So we've done 15 live guest speaker events in the last year.
That's good.
And then just the basic support. Today I had a list of 8 new families who have called just wondering where to go, what to do, problems with getting schools. So tell us,
where do they go, what to do, how do they get in touch with you?
AutismBelize.org. We have a WhatsApp button right there, so you WhatsApp and you get me, so that they message there from the AutismBelize.org, or you can go to Facebook or Instagram and private message that way to reach out to us.
AutismBelize.org.
AutismBelize.org. If you search any social media, Autism Belize, that's how you reach out. Our website has a lot of the resources, but a lot of parents they need the guidance to start. And so before April, when the numbers have been inundating with us, some of the calls, like I'd get 1 or 2 a week, and it's 2-hour conversation sometimes. It's walking them through, it's listening. I've had so many parents say, I feel like this is the first time someone's understanding me.
And it's probably true too.
I felt so alone. Or I've had some that I've met for coffee, mom and dad, who kind of think that way, but they're still afraid to go through the diagnosis. So we've coached them through that process. So really, it's been a lot of parent support. Now, our goal is going forward, because now we're an official NGO. Woohoo! So the goal going forward is to focus on some grant writing and have more services that can
be provided for the children and the children.
We have some ideas about helping for teens for social skills group. I've got a crazy idea on a buddy system. So many of the high schools and tertiary students need community service hours. And we have so many parents who their kids have no friends, they have nothing.
Right.
And so the idea is through using an app pairing the high school student with the, depending on location and activity. So if you sign up as a high school student and say, I love swimming and I live in this area, you might be paired with Mateo. And so maybe once a month you guys can go swimming together or do like that.
Right.
And there's long-term benefits for that, because we need to build capacity in this country.
Right.
Unfortunately, when we think special needs, all we think is special needs education, right?
Right.
But there's so much more. There's occupational therapy, behavior therapy, playtime therapy, speech therapy, all that you make really good money on that is in high demand because we don't have any
at all.
And the thing is that these kids don't know about this. This isn't even an idea, a speck of an idea in their heads because there's no exposure to it. But if they are exposed to our children, if they are interacting, if they become
then
a
things
shadow,
can begin and we can start to solve the problem.
Exactly. I mean, it's a long-term thing, but this is what it is. I spoke to Rotary, who then one of the Rotarians said, I want you to talk to my sister. And again, I spoke to the sister and she says, I studied at my degree in psychology, but then I was working at this place and I started dealing with these special needs kids and I was thinking I want to go back and do special ed, but I can't do my master's in special ed because I didn't do education first. And I was like, but I want to work with these kids. And I said, do you know about this, this, and that? And she's like, no. And I said, well, before you go apply.
So you're helping the students now who's going to go back to school.
Before you apply for any scholarship for a master's or anything, I have homework for you. Go research these jobs. Go see what they're about in these positions. And then let's talk again and see if you really want to do special education, or maybe there is something else with your psychology basis to do in this country. But she only got to this point because she was exposed. We need to expose our kids. It's an awareness building. I feel like it helps round out our children. Our goal for Autism Belize is to build awareness so that we can have a kinder, more accepting, transformed Belize. I feel if we are more accepting of differences, we as a country are going to be stronger.
Much better, much better.
Exactly.
Christy, it's been an extremely enlightening discussion, and I thank you so much for being candid. It's a really very important issue that we're talking about. You're coming from it for a personal point of view, and you're obviously very energized, to help others. So I'm sure you're going to get a ton load of calls and WhatsApps and reach outs.
And normally, I'm going to give a caveat.
Thank you so much.
Normally, I'm good about reporting a call. Please give me a day or two because we have been getting. There's so many families out there. So I'm very grateful you chose to cover this topic on the conversation.
Yes, and thank you so much. Keep up the good work and good luck. And who knows, maybe we talk about it again.
Well, next year, April is coming back, and we're going to have lots of activities throughout the year as well, I swear.
Yes,
Thank you.
Viewers, we will pause for our first ad break, and when we return, we will be speaking with a medical professional who will shed some more light on autism spectrum disorder. Be right back. Good night and welcome back to the conversation. I am your host, Carla Barnett. April is Autism Awareness Month, and tonight we are discussing autism with parents and medical professionals. Mrs. Deshane Gutierrez Lopez is a registered clinical psychologist in Belize who specializes in administering and interpreting psychological and psychoeducational assessments for learning disabilities, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, and other developmental disorders. She also specializes in counseling treatment for children, teenagers, and adults experiencing depression, anxiety, and sexual trauma. Welcome to the conversation, Deshane. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good.
Great. Thanks for coming here. We heard from Christy what autism spectrum disorder is, but please explain it to us from a clinical standpoint.
Okay. So autism spectrum disorder is a neurobiological disorder. So it's a disorder of the brain.
Okay.
The main characteristics is difficulty in social communication and repetitive behavior. And so those are the hallmark in terms of what we're looking for.
Right.
It's a spectrum disorder, so it's an umbrella term, and it ranges in terms of the different levels whereby a person may engage in. For some persons, the severity or they may not be as severe.
Right.
So when we think about autism spectrum, we oftentimes think about it as linear, from severe to high functioning. But it could vary. In one area, it may be severe, but in another area, it's not severe in one person. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one person is severe on every area.
Okay.
They could have strength in other area as well. So sometimes...
Okay, so let me get this right. Spectrum doesn't necessarily mean from mild to severe.
Yes.
It means differences along the way in terms of the combination of symptoms as well.
Exactly. So as humans, we have different skills. We have cognitive skills, social skills, we have our sensory processing skills. So on different areas, you may have strengths and you may have weaknesses. Just like the hallmark for autism is the social communication and repetitive behavior. So that doesn't mean that they don't have other strengths in other areas.
How does someone get diagnosed with autism here in Belize? Where do they go? Where do their parents take them?
So a person can go to their pediatrician, because most of the time the pediatrician is the first person that would suggest, you know what, I suspect. Some parents are internet savvy, so if they notice that their child isn't meeting developmental milestones, there's a concern. For counseling and psychological services, we also offer assessment, screening, and diagnosis from the age of 18 months. So from the time a child is 18 months and you're suspecting that your child has autism or some developmental delay, you can come to us to get assessed.
Okay. If your child is diagnosed with autism, what happens next? What services are available?
So the next step is depending on the diagnosis that you get. So yes, you get a diagnosis that your child is autistic. But you want to have a comprehensive assessment, because that will tell you what will be the next step for your child. Okay. Or at least an idea, right? Because a diagnosis is one part of the process. But like I said before, in terms of the different areas that a child has, they may need support in certain areas and in other areas that they don't need that support. So a comprehensive assessment will tell you the areas that you want to focus on initially. In Belize, we have ABA therapists and speech therapists. Those are the two services that I'm aware of in Belize that provide those services for the next step.
When we were talking with Christy a while ago, she said there's no occupational therapy and play
don't have
therapy
any
and those other kinds.
Therapies. So we have limited, but we do have ABA therapists and speech therapists.
What is the treatment for autism spectrum disorder?
So when we think treatment, people oftentimes think about cure. So again, it all depends on your child's profile. So I may have a child that language is their biggest area, and so they will need speech therapy.
They don't speak, or they
behaviorally, they may work with a behavioral therapist. Now, ideally, we want them to have all the different type of services available that would benefit them on all different areas. So now we have ABA therapists that may be doing two different tasks, because they're related somehow and yet they're different. And so we try to maximize as best as possible in terms of how do we try to bridge the gap because of limited resources.
Do we have any idea how many people are affected by autism spectrum disorder in Belize? Are there any statistics?
For my office, for every boy that I assess, for every 4 boys that I assess 1 girl. And that has been consistent for the past 4 years.
What does that mean? Boys are affected more than girls, or boys are...
Parents, for the signs, boys' behavior, the diagnostic manual that we use, classify boys much easier. And so a lot of the studies were predominantly males. So when we look at the characteristics, it's describing a boy. And so the warning signs for girls doesn't usually show up until the social demand becomes greater. So when they start primary school, that's where the parents get concerned, while boys from an earlier age are the ones where parents come in earlier. As well, in terms of the behavior that we're looking at. So
Right.
a lot of the time, the boys are more hyper and having difficulty with
Right.
social communication. But if we see a little girl in the corner, we just say, oh, she's shy, and that's it. So even our social norms, we accept certain things from girls, but for
Right.
boys, we don't. It's hard for us to say, well, he's just shy. So then that's where the concern come in, and then people start to research. So a lot of the time, boys come in more, and this isn't just in Belize. Worldwide, boys tend to be
Right.
tested more than girls, because
Okay.
of what we look for.
Okay, so we have to be careful and look at that a little bit more.
Yes.
And it's as reading recently, where in various branches of medicine, because a lot of the testing has been on males, then a lot of the impact on females really doesn't come out until later on. Regardless of whether an adult is high functioning or severely affected, autistic symptoms commonly interfere with everyday life. Can you share with us what autism spectrum disorder looks like in an adult?
So most of the assessment I've done are primarily with children. I've only heard stories from older persons saying, you know what, my child is autistic. We knew for years, we went outside of the country, we got tested. And for them, it's hard to find resources here in Belize, because even now, their concern is most of the resources are for children.
Right.
And so a lot of the time, parents are the one trying to figure out how, as much as possible, they can
Right.
adapt for their child.
Right.
So a lot of the time, the older adults now, depending on their functioning, didn't get as much support. And
Right.
so they're probably at home more getting support rather than attending mainstream classes.
Right, because certainly when I was a child, quote unquote, strange behavior was seen as just that, and there's a lot of stigma attached to it as well. Can this be a big deterrent for diagnosis? How do you get past that stigma in order to get help for your child?
So that's why I love the month of April, and I love that Christy's back in Belize, because before, for the past 4 years, I've been back home. That has been one of my things that I've been trying to educate.
Right.
But Christy and her team has been doing a great job
yeah.
in promoting
Oh, yeah.
widespread, because that is important in terms of the fear for your child being diagnosed is also because of being shunned from society. Or
Right.
people won't understand. So it's
Right.
easier to have your child at home, because then people won't look at you or give you the eye when your child is having a meltdown. I make it a conscious effort when I'm on the bus that when I see a child is either
Right.
experiencing tantrum or a meltdown, I give the mom a smile so that she doesn't
Right.
feel uncomfortable.
Right,
Because
right,
that's what
right.
parents is afraid of in terms of how will people interact with me, how will they interact with my child, will people get what I'm experiencing?
So it's really very important for us to be a lot more tolerant and a lot more understanding, and not be shunning our
Yes.
children. Ms. Lopez Deshane, you really provided a lot of valuable information for our viewers on this very important topic. Thank you so much for your time tonight with us, and we very much enjoyed the information that you provided.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Viewers, we will take a short break and be right back to continue this important conversation on autism spectrum disorder. Thank you for staying tuned into the conversation. I am Carla Barnett. As we heard earlier, caring for an autistic child can be very challenging. We spoke with a parent of a 6-year-old autistic boy who shared with us what her experience is caring for her son. Here is her story.
Jalen is 6 years old. He'll be 7 in September. When Jalen was 2 years old, we discovered that something was wrong, as he was mute. He wouldn't respond to his name. He was very hyper. So that's when we decided to take him for a checkup. And that's when Dr. Eck told us that he was autistic. It's been very hard, but it's also fun because Jalen is a fun kid, right, Jay? Jalen loves swimming. Right, Jalen? Jalen was enrolled in Inspiration Center for Speech Therapy, but a little mishap happened and he was taken out from the courses because he had bit the speech therapist, and from then he's not back in the courses yet. He was prescribed with a medication, yes, but actually I only gave him it for a week because it wasn't, he had difficulties with it, like he was sleeping too much or he was getting aggressive, so that's when I took him off the medication. Jalen needs to be where it's cool. Jalen doesn't like the heat, so financially I had to do AC in my house. Jalen loves swimming, so we had to buy a pool for him to entertain him during the time. Jalen caregivers are his siblings. My 20-year-old daughter, she takes care of him, and my 13-year-old son, along with my mother. It's very difficult as Jalen is the one that goes to sleep at night 11, and by 2, 3 in the morning, he's already up to start his day. So that become a bit tiring for me. So that's when I decided to start my own business so that I could have more time to be with him and more time at home, sleep time. We always have to be explaining to people as to why, because they tend to have tantrums based on noise. Like I said, with Jalen, it's the heat. Jalen doesn't like to feel hot. But what I've noticed so far is that when I take Jalen out, most of the times people always try to help us rather than criticize us. So that's a good part about it. What I do, I select places to take Jalen where I know it would be calm for him or it's going to be hard on him. Then I don't take him with us certain places. My biggest concern is that I'm praying and hoping that kids with autism can also be categorized as some senior citizen or visible disability, because it's like you asked the question before, how difficult it is for us to take him. Like, for example, if we go to the clinic, we would have to be, if we're number 50, we would have to wait till it's our turn. Probably the boat ride to the Keys, we would have to wait our turn. The bus, we would have to wait our turn. So that is my biggest advocate that I want to bring across for kids with autism, because kids with autism doesn't have a look. So you can't look at him and say, oh, he has a disability, because you would never tell that he's autistic. So that's my biggest dream for us mothers with kids with autism.
Our final guest this evening is Elia Aviles, who heads the Department for Special Education Division at Horizon Academy. Her duties include planning and coordinating programs, providing support to the class teachers, facilitating in-staff training, and providing direct intervention for the children who are a part of the program. Welcome to the show, Ms. Aviles.
Hello, good night. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Having a child diagnosed with autism can no doubt be hard on the parents as well as on the other members of the family. Most autistic children cannot express themselves verbally, which leaves parents to constantly be guessing what their child needs. What do you advise families and parents on learning how to communicate with their child?
Okay, well, that's a big one for parents, right? Mm-hmm. One of the first things I think that I can say to parents regarding communicating with their children is just learning your child, observing your child first. Mm-hmm. And that in itself will somewhat direct you in what you can try. You know, right. There is never any clear-cut answer on maybe just do this specific thing for your child. It's constantly
Okay.
experimenting through observation of your child. So some of those things
Learning
will
what works. Yeah.
learning what
What
works.
the child responds to.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
to remember, like a rule of thumb, I would say, even with all our children, is to consider the whole child, right?
Right.
Move in that holistic way. So you want to do things that are visual, that are auditory, that are verbal communication. So you might want to use pictures,
Right.
gestures, yes, labeling the things at home, pointing at it. That's a very important skill to teach our
Right.
children at home. Pointing at what they need or want. Um,
Right.
yeah, communicating how they're feeling if they're at that point yet.
Right. Siblings of children with a disability or illness often feel neglected. They often feel embarrassed, angry. They may even have behavioral challenges of their own. They act out sometimes. What can be done to make them feel included in the care of their sibling with autism or other disabilities?
Wow. That's emotional and psychological health, right, for our
Right.
children. So I think, again, it would go right back to the parent,
Right.
modeling how to welcome that child and communicating with the siblings
Right.
of your child with autism.
Right.
Explaining to them that, yes, your brother, your sister might require more attention, more effort, more work, but it doesn't mean that we don't love you or we don't care,
Right.
right? And setting
Right.
specific time aside for those siblings, okay? It might not be as much as they want, but at least they will know that you are taking that extra measure to give them
With
the
them as
support
well.
that they need.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
definitely.
Right. I understand that keeping routines is very important for an autistic person to learn and to manage their daily lives. How can families adjust to changes in routines from the pandemic when caring for someone with autism, because the pandemic has changed all of our routines?
It really has, and we're doing our best to work with our parents that we are with right now. So establishing those routines. I'm sure if you already are doing these routines at home, maybe parents are already using what you might have heard about visual schedules or the
Right. Right.
and so one of the easier things to do is then to modify your visual schedule or whatever is your communication tool that you're using at home. Modify it
Right.
to include the procedures, the safety measures that you would want to go through with hand washing and the mask wearing and the
Right.
distance. And then
Right.
again, holistically modeling these things and practicing it over and over with your
Right.
child
So that
is
the
very
routine
important.
becomes normalized. Are
Right.
there training opportunities for caregivers to learn how to care for someone with autism?
Say that again, please.
Are there any training opportunities if a caregiver wants to learn how to care for a person with autism? Is there somewhere they can go to get that training?
So right now, because of Miss Christie and her group that she has established, we are seeing a more training happening. But
Right.
to say that there is somewhere to go for training, not really. There,
Okay.
there is a ministry, NARCI, that you can go for advice, right?
Right.
Information regarding how to work with a child with autism.
Right. For
And then,
families, go on, go on.
I'm sorry, and then I would say, if your interest is there and you want to know, read. Read, that's what I do.
Right,
Read,
right.
talk to people, and just learn as much as you possibly can.
For families or friends of adults who are living with autism, what advice do you have for them to assist the adults?
Wow, sadly, if the community, society still has a long way to go,
Right.
So I would say speaking to other parents would be one of the biggest things for me to advise. Speaking with other parents, getting
Right.
that support. Parents have a plethora of experience and they can learn from each
From each
other.
other.
Yes,
Right, right.
yes.
And any final words, Ms. Aviles?
I think I want to direct it a little bit more to the teachers, as well. If you have a child with autism or you're not sure, whatever is the special need, right? I know we're talking about autism. Just
Right.
remember that these are children and we are in this profession and we are directed by love and interest. And so if we try to equip ourselves with knowledge and share what we know, then it will benefit all of our children, right?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. Ms. Aviles, thank you so much for joining the conversation tonight and for providing very useful insights and practical tips for coping with autism spectrum disorder.
Thank you too.
Right. We know now that there is not one universal autism, but many subtypes, most influenced by a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Because autism is a spectrum disorder, each person with autism has a distinct set of strengths and challenges. The ways in which people with autism learn, think, and problem solve can range from highly skilled to severely challenged. And the level of care they enjoy can range from extremely well to extremely poor. Determining factor can be narrowed down to one word: support. Right now, a few groups like Autism Believes, Let's Talk, are mobilizing their own awareness campaigns to sensitize our entire country about what this disorder means and the type of help autistic people require. But that is only phase one of the campaign. The ultimate goal is to garner even more support for autistic people and their caregivers, since more than just understanding is required. The quality of life for autistic people and children especially dramatically improves when their loved ones enjoy the support of the wider community. Simple acts of support include letting them jump in the line ahead of you, offering comforting words to a parent trying to quell a tantrum, and even loaning toys, crayons, or something entertaining to an autistic child out in public to help manage their hyperactivity, if it applies. As is the case with many other challenges we face in our society, supporting those who need us most is the next best thing to a miracle. We can do it. With that, our time is up for tonight. Remember to join us on Mondays at 7 p.m. for new episodes of The Conversation right here on CBTV and on Colorblind's Facebook page. Good night and take care.